This is Courtney Mason, and this is the Millennial Dreamers Podcast. Hey, friend. Happy New Year. As the old folks say, it's been a good long while since we last spoke. And trust me when I say I have missed talking to you and connecting with all of the listeners here at Millennial Dreamers. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this new year. No matter how your 2021 started and ended, the fact of the matter is we made it over. All right, we are squarely in 2022. And what a time to be alive, am I right? And so you will see from the title of the episode that this is about setting a theme for the year. I like to start the year off with or just contemplating what the theme might be so that I can kind of put myself in the mind state of what I want to do, what I want to accomplish, and things like that. And so this year for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, I spent a lot of time either journaling, reflecting, reading, cleaning out my closet, cleaning up the house, different things like that. And so I initially thought as I was writing that this would be the year of like discipline and focus. But I think a few days after New Year's Day, I spoke with one of my friends. And the good thing about friendship, and I'm very grateful for the friends that I've had because they have listened to my dreams and my fears. They've watched me have wins, and they've also seen me self-sabotage at times. They've seen me second-guess myself with some of my ideas. They see me go after them, pivot, abandon things, pick them back up, and all sorts of things. So my friend Andrea, she is also on her own kind of dream chasing journey and seeking and learning, but she still has the frame of mind to remember the things that I've talked about that I've been going through, which I can really appreciate that. And so she was listening to a podcast that she really enjoys, and she shared an episode with me. And it was an episode from the Over It and On With It podcast with Christine Hassler. It was episode, I believe, 329, and Andrea shared it with me, and I was just like, oh, wow, this is so great. I was actually unfamiliar with Christine prior to, but she's a life coach, she's an author, and she's so many other amazing things. And on her show, she does live coaching calls on some of the episodes where a listener can call in and explain what their pain point might be. And Christine actually coaches them on the call for other listeners, the audience, us, we can hear the coaching call. And then afterwards, she will then explain why she coached that person in the way that she did and what was the reason for some of her pointers. And so it allows her to give specific advice to the caller, but also to help listeners as well, so we can kind of get a framework. And so, like I said, it was episode 329, and it was entitled Let Go of Self-Doubt and Trust Your Intuition with Tammy. Tammy was a caller. I actually recommend listening to the episode in its entirety because she touched on a number of points that I think will serve anyone who's listening who has ever struggled with self-doubt and, trusting their own intuition. I would definitely recommend it. But one thing and one point in particular that really sat with me and why I wanted to crown 2022 as the year of radical self-acceptance was one point. And I'll just say that Tammy literally sounded like a stand-in for myself. She asked about how she could trust her intuition more, but she also brought up something that I really resonated with, and that's the habit of chronic learning, being a habitual learner, and how it can sometimes stall forward progress. She said she struggled. I believe she was a coach and several other things, but one thing regarding her coaching, she basically, explained how she always felt like she didn't know enough, right? She purchased lots of courses, trainings, and she would go back and get certifications and just always constantly saying, oh, well, maybe this will help me do X, Y, and Z. Oh, I think this will be a good thing for me to learn and add to my repertoire. It will help me with my students. It will help me seem more credible. And Christine made a point that a lot of us with self-doubt, we constantly look for ways to improve because in essence, we're attempting to combat the feeling of not enoughness, quote unquote, with more information. Because at the root of it all, we don't feel like we're enough. We don't feel that what we know right now and who we are and, all of those things is enough to do whatever it is that we want to do, to chase whatever that dream is, to stand in it and, be confident in it. So it looks a lot like what we call imposter syndrome, which I've talked about on the podcast before. And I am not unlike anyone else who is following their heart and going after a dream. I also deal with imposter syndrome to a certain degree. We want to make sure that we know everything sometimes, so people won't know that in some areas we're insecure, or we question whether or not we can do things. And I have felt that as well. So Christine noted that confidence is self-acceptance, right? It's loving who you are right now. It's not trying to be something or someone else. It's acknowledging what you are and how you are in this moment right now and accepting that. Radical self-acceptance is self-love. And if we accept that we are not necessarily where we want to be, we are in a place of self-love and not in judgment of ourselves, right? So basically, Christine was telling Tammy, she was like, it's not as if you are trying to pull the wool over your students' eyes, or you're not operating from a place of integrity. You're not trying to act as if you know a bunch of things that you don't know. You know certain things and you're sharing it with your students. And by doing that, you're in a place of empathy. You can empathize with your students because you're like, I know exactly how you feel in this moment because I'm actually learning and growing. And what I'm learning, I'm reinforcing it by teaching you what I've learned and helping you along the way. And I feel the same way about the podcast. I never put myself in a place where I'm considering myself to know everything. That's why I love having guests on, because I can ask so many questions that I know so many of you might be listening and wondering, how did this person get to this level of success? How did they, in their industry, in their, career path, in their role, how did they get there? What were the things that led them to their position? And I'm a student, so I'm listening, and I feel it an honor to have this podcast to provide a platform for other entrepreneurs to share their work, but for listeners to gain some knowledge so that we can grow and we can get to whatever level that we are seeking to achieve. So I just thought that was a beautiful way. And if you listen, you'll see all the different things that they talked about, how to know, trust your intuition, or recognize intuition versus fear. What are the signs? One thing that Christine mentioned is that we know it's our intuition if we can feel it within our body. Sometimes the fear thoughts come from our mind. We create that with our mind. But if it's your intuition, there is no fear. You can feel it within your body. So she explained it beautifully. She talked about it beautifully. But that piece about self-acceptance and self-love is something that I said, you know what? This year isn't about discipline and focus. Those are sub-themes for the year. This year is about accepting where we are now, giving ourselves grace and compassion, and not being our own worst critic, because I can be that person. I will, even with friends sometimes they'll say, why are you always making these jokes? I can do the self-deprecating thing where I make fun of myself or I poke fun, but in a way, that's my way of poking fun at me before someone else can do it. And so I recognize that. And so I did look online to just kind of see what other people are talking about. Is radical self-acceptance something that people talk about? And ironically, there are lots of people who are feeling the same way, so much so that one young lady I saw on Amazon wrote a book called Radical Self-Acceptance, a Buddhist guide to freeing yourself. And the little intro or bio about the book, it says, On Radical Self-Acceptance, this respected clinical psychologist and Buddhist meditation teacher shows you how to free yourself from the grip of your insecurities about being, quote unquote, good enough. And so I thought that was amazing. A few strategies that I thought that I wanted to look up and see, okay, so what are some things that I can share just based on me looking into this as something that would be helpful for myself as well. What are some ways that we can practice radical self-acceptance? And one article that I read on mindbodygreen.com was that first, we want to slow down whenever we feel ourselves starting to self-judge. Take a moment, take a step back, and recognize that, we're in a place of judgment and we're not in a place of self-love. So, let's say, for instance, you have a goal. You would love for your body to be a certain thing. You would love to lose X amount of pounds, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever it is. Right now, if you're just judging, like, oh, I'm just so, fat, or I just am out of shape and this, that, and the third, you're in a place of judgment. You're not in a place of self-love. But if you love your body as is, if you love your body as the vessel that has brought you through 2020 and 2021 and all the years that preceded that, like, that's something to be proud of. That's something not to judge, but to love and say, how amazing it is to have this body, to have this temple that I get to, go into the world with. It's healthy, regardless of aesthetic things. It's healthy. I have movement of my limbs, right? I feel good. Even if I would like to lose X amount of pounds, even if I would love to do some, improve upon the vessel, I'm so grateful for my body as is, and love on yourself. I think that's a beautiful thing. Another point that article I mentioned, it says, remember that every setback is a learning opportunity. Instead of, we should have like an inner dialogue that say, I wonder what I was feeling when I did that thing, or, it's okay, I'm still learning. If you get something wrong, I know sometimes for me, I'm afraid of looking like an imbecile at times, depending on what it is. And so I have to just remind myself, you don't have to know everything. You don't know everything. So it's okay. It's a learning opportunity. You got something wrong. You made a mistake here. It's a learning opportunity. The third thing that the article said was avoid comparison. That's a biggie. This is digital age. You're on, I'm sure, at least one social media platform. And it's easy to get sucked into comparing your life and what you have going on to what someone else is showing you. We can be in radical self-acceptance when we avoid comparing ourselves to others and, being appreciative of our own lives and not obsessing about someone else's. And the fourth thing was lean on the practices that remind you that thoughts are fleeting. So lean on the practices that help to remind you that thoughts are fleeting. So the next time you feel self-critical, try a practice that can lead you into a state of mind that's more positive and remind you that, those thoughts are fleeting. So meditation, walking, serving others, doing different things that'll place you in a place of gratitude are amazing ways that we can kind of help ourselves be in a place of radical self-acceptance. So I'm wanting to set that as the theme for 2022. If you have another theme for the year, I'd love to hear it. Send me an email to millennialdreamerspodcast@gmail.com. I love to hear from you. But I think for me, especially because I'm so, I can recognize that within myself, that I have much work to do on just being okay with not being perfect. This idea of perfectionism and all these feelings that drum up because of it they aren't doing me any favors. And so I'm sure someone who's listening can probably resonate with that. We have to give ourselves grace. We have dealt with some of the craziest things within the past 2 years, come upon lots of challenges, I'm sure, and God bless you if you've had like an amazing 2 years. But for most people, you've had at least some level of hardship or some difficulty or some challenge you've had to work through just by adjusting to a way of life that's been different from what we've always known. So I think we can all agree that we need more grace, more compassion, more empathy for ourselves. And then we can then move into a place of improving and growing and developing. And it doesn't have to, the two don't have to be, completely exclusive from one another. We can improve upon ourselves while also accepting where we are and loving on ourselves. So thank you so much for listening. I'm thrilled to be back. I'm thrilled to have sparks of creativity and inspiration again because, for so long at the tail end of 2021, I kind of was combating those feelings of not being inspired or motivated. And I try my best to lean into that and accept that. But now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm like, you know what, you can lean more into self-acceptance even more. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not, subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment. I always say leave a comment. That's just like typical social media brain. Leave a review, something on iTunes or Spotify, if Spotify's allowed, wherever you're listening. I appreciate it so much. It means the world to me, and we're gonna do it. And sending so much love and positivity to you. Peace and love, friends. Bye.